As the temps start rising, I feel the familiar urge to refresh my closet, but I don't want to waste money on pieces I'll only wear once or for just one season. Thankfully, Quince changes that. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and far more elevated than anything else at this price. It finally feels like my wardrobe matches my standards. The best part is that Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes, so you get to look good while feeling good. I'm pretty excited that I have upgraded my athleisure wardrobe for this summer. I bought a sweatshirt and a pair of wide-leg flow pants that are two of the softest items I own, and I plan to live in them. So join me in giving your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/POTC to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC.
A lot of people spend so much time creating these food rules and then putting themselves in food jail for not following them. And so they're like, oh, I can have this amount of this. And they're so focused on amount or restriction or restraint that they're not actually even enjoying the food. And so here it opens up the freedom to be able to actually taste, to savor, to enjoy, and find the food that really works well with our bodies.
That was Dr. Judson Brewer on Psychologists Off the Clock.
We are four experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas from psychology to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, and author of Act for Burnout, Act Daily Journal, and the Act Daily Card Deck.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and author of an upcoming book on being a better conversationalist and making friends.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Hello, everyone. Michael here. I'm sitting here with Jill to discuss my interview with Dr. Judson Brewer on his latest book, The Hunger Habit, Why We Eat When We're Not Hungry and How to Stop. So, Jill, tell me, what were your thoughts on the interview?
Well, this interview was so impactful for me, Michael. I listened to it twice. The second time I sat down and took notes, and then I immediately ordered the book. And that is certainly not something I do with all of our interviews. And I just, this is something I've struggled with my whole life. And as I've shared only very recently, in fact, it's good timing. We're meeting today on March 13th. The episode doesn't come out right away, but we're meeting on March 13th. And in 2 days, it will be the 3-year anniversary of when I had bariatric surgery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's a big day coming up. And there are so many things I learned from Dr. Brewer that I think are really going to help me continue to succeed long term. And I've started to do some health coaching with bariatric patients to help them with long-term success. And that's really why I bought the book, is he gave us so many incredible skills and tidbits throughout this interview that I know I'll use for myself, and that I want to, when I do this coaching, it's all ACT-based. And there are just so many things I know his book will allow me to really help my clients with long-term success following their own surgery. So I just loved it. Really well done.
Yeah, I'm fully there with you as well. This was one of the books where not even after I finished it, but while I was reading it, my lifestyle changed. My approach to food changed. And I will say, and I think I mentioned this in the interview as well, I am a healthy eater. I like cooking, and I eat too much because this stuff is really good. And I'm a habitual eater when I'm watching TV. And what I've learned with this book, actually, here's an example from yesterday when I was out with a really good friend and we were at a restaurant and we ate something. And then I felt like just a little bit of like a dessert. I wanted something sweet. And the only thing they had that was vegan was like pancakes. So that's not for me, no offense, but I'm not a pancake person. And then I saw they had vegan pie in the counter as well. It's like, yeah, okay, I didn't plan for pie and it's a big slice, but let's eat it. And I did what Dr. Brewer in the interview said. I checked it with my body. It's like, why, Michael, why are you going to eat that piece of pie? And the answer was because it's there. Because here's a restaurant that has a vegan pie. So that's why I'm eating it. And that was not good enough. And my body immediately was like, yeah, you know what? That's a good point. Like, this is not something we need to eat right now.
Yeah. And I think often what gets us into trouble is the way that we think about, oh, that will taste good. I think I'm going to enjoy this. And from this headspace, and what he talked about that's helpful, that you'll get more into in the episode, is the importance of really sinking down into the body and paying attention to, how does this actually taste? How does it actually make me feel? And really paying attention and registering that so that you can recall that when you go to make decisions. And that was something that was really mind blowing. And I agree with you. I am quite certain that just listening to this episode is going to immediately change some of my behaviors. And I can't wait to see how it goes.
And by the way, dear listener, if this is going to come out in April, first week of April, as you listen to this, and if you have friends or if you yourself have started a diet at the beginning of the year and you're struggling with it, or it's too restrictive and you have to show up at parties and you can't eat the food that's there, whatever. This is really an episode that if you have a friend like that, feel free and send them this episode, send them our way, let them become a new fan of Psychologists Off the Clock and share the love. And in general, if you like an episode that we're putting out there, you would do us and your friends a favor by sending them a friendly reminder to listen to this awesome episode.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things I liked about this episode is, he talks about the ways in which the food industry is designed to make us want to eat more and more. So even if you are a person or have friends in your life who aren't necessarily like dieting or actively trying to lose weight, I know loads of people who struggle with emotional eating and just feeling kind of out of control around food. And food is designed to make us feel that way, at least processed food is, right? And so he really gives people just a great set of tools for changing your relationship to food and eating, irrespective of, kind of your overarching goals. And I thought that was so great.
And you have to change the relationship with food. It's a must. There's something he writes in The Hunger Habit that I don't think we cover, we talk about in the interview, and that is our body's reaction to diets is logically the same as our body's reaction to starvation used to be.
Right.
If our body 10,000 years ago, well, not my body, but one of my ancestors' bodies back then lost a couple of pounds, evolutionarily speaking, the body would insist on getting these pounds back. No questions asked. Like, this was important. And that's what we're still doing when we're doing these regular diets that are not lifestyle changes, but restricted eating.
They work against us. And all the while we're trying to fight a multi-billion, maybe trillion-dollar industry. And, the other thing he talks about in terms of changing your relationship to food is like learning. And again, really it all came down to paying attention. Like that was really the key. And not just paying attention in a way to stop eating certain things or eating less, but enjoying the food you do eat. And he had this quote. He said, "Food rules and food jail robs us of enjoyment and discovering what works for our body." And that was like, I got chills and I immediately wrote it down and was like, yes, we have to stop doing this and find ways to just have a healthier relationship to what can and should be not just something that gives us energy, but that certainly can also bring us pleasure.
Yes. So I hope you enjoy my interview with Dr. Judson Brewer. Dr. Judson Brewer is an internationally renowned addiction psychiatrist and neuroscientist. He is a professor in the School of Public Health and Medical School at Brown University. His 2016 TED Talk, A Simple Way to Break a Bad Habit, has been viewed more than 30 million times. His first book, The Craving Mind, was published in more than 16 languages, and his second book, Unwinding Anxiety, was an instant New York Times bestseller. Today, I'm discussing his newest book with him, The Hunger Habit, Why We Eat When We're Not Hungry and How to Stop. Hello, Dr. Judd. Welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So I was just realizing as I was getting ready for this interview today that The Craving Mind is probably the non-fiction book that I reread the most. So
Really?
You'll have to bear with me a little bit if I'm geeking out.
I'm blushing. That's so nice to hear.
Yeah, I see. So, your book, The Hunger Habit, what made you write it?
Well, it started with my own struggles with helping my patients who are struggling with binge eating, stress eating, overeating, and things like that. And my lab had been studying habit change for a while. We'd gotten some positive results from a study using mindfulness to help people quit smoking, gotten 5 times the quit rates of gold standard treatment. And after that study, we were trying to figure out how to make it more accessible. And so we started playing with app-based training. This is back, mind you, back in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So, way before the term digital therapeutic hadn't even been invented for 5 years. So this is pretty early days. So we were just trying to figure out how to help people. And we were developing this app called Craving to Quit. And people were telling us that they were shifting their eating habits when they were testing out the app. And I was thinking, okay, most people gain weight when they quit smoking, you on average about 15 pounds. But these people stopped me and said, no, we're actually using these tools to change our snacking habits. Mm-hmm. And that was a big aha moment for me because as an addiction psychiatrist, I'd never really thought about, helping people change eating habits. There's so much out there. Everybody has advice on what to eat or how to diet or this and that. And I didn't want to wade into that mess. But they brought up something really interesting, which was that this is really the root of how a lot of people form these unhealthy eating habits. And so I started looking at it a little bit more and said, wait a minute, there might be something here where we could actually use some of these neuroscience-based approaches that were helping my patients in my clinic, but also helping people quit smoking and actually help them change their eating habits as well. And so we developed this, Eat Right Now program and started testing it and learned a ton about how this process works. And fortunately had some really good results there in helping people cut down on, unhealthy eating habits. One study, this was led by Ashley Mason at UCSF, got a 40% reduction in craving-related eating. So that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's a lot. And as opposed to smoking, for example, like food isn't optional. I can't stop food, right? It's always going to be in my fridge, in my kitchen. Otherwise, I'll have a problem of quite a different nature. So what is the problem that we're facing as a society, as a culture with eating and food in general?
Well, I think you're really touching on something important, which is, with smoking, for example, it's anti-survival, and more likely to lead to an untimely demise as compared to help us survive. But as you're pointing out, it's really important. We all have to get a certain number of calories in every day to survive. And so eating turns out to be a much harder problem than smoking. Smoking, don't get me wrong, very hard, but doable. With eating, there's, we have to get calories in. On top of that, there's an entire multi-billion-dollar industry that's designing food to make it more addictive so that we'll consume more and, to help their profit margins. So there's that piece on top of the fact that we need to eat. Oh, then let's add in, any of us that inadvertently were rewarded as kids by our parents. If you're good at church or in the grocery store or wherever, we'll give you some ice cream or we'll give you a lollipop or something like that. Or, finish your dinner and then you can have some dessert. So all of these things can lead to people joining the clean plate club where they just habitually eat all of their food, even though they're not hungry. Or people, just learning to associate food with reward. Okay, but wait, there's more.
There's more.
Then we learn how to use food as a way to soothe our moods. And so if we learn, we learn to pair food with celebration, right? That's positive reinforcement. Then we learn to pair food with consolation. That's negative reinforcement. So all of our most basic learning mechanisms are getting co-opted by this, what could be a very simple process, which is just helping us get the calories that we need to eat. Oh, and then what about social things, right? So we could go on and on and on because food is so central to our lives.
Yeah, and as opposed to standing outside with a cigarette, you're not being frowned upon for, adding yet another plate to your dinner. And I read the Clean Plate Club for the first time in this book, but I've certainly been conditioned in childhood. I don't know if this is a German thing or if this is in the US as well, as young Michael was told by grandma that if I'm cleaning my plate, the sun is going to shine tomorrow. So I never checked that. Is that something in the US as well, or is this a European thing?
Yes.
So young Michael never checked this for correlation or even causation. But I think I might have had a non-significant impact on climate change today because I was really good at cleaning my plate, because apparently that's what I needed to do to be able to play outside tomorrow.
It'd be interesting to hear if that is still at play today, because all the kids could just look at their phones and be like, no, the weather app says it's going to be this tomorrow. It worked back then.
Apple Weather tells me I don't need to clean my plate. True. So now on the cultural thing, we have this other movement that, in air quotes, is now the one to go with if you want to live healthy. And that is, you measure what you eat. You put it on a scale, you track your micronutrients, you make sure you have enough of everything, and you're not overeating because, I've reached my amount of calories for today. So that's it. Good boy. Let's start again from zero tomorrow. And that comes with yet another plate, pun intended,
right,
of troubles.
Right. So here we're learning to do the opposite of what's actually going to be helpful, which is to look outside of ourselves to determine what we need. So, there are all these very popular calorie trackers, whether it's a phone or something else. They're notoriously not accurate because they give you some basic estimation, but they're not accurate enough for the individual. So that's just the problem to start with. But on top of this, they teach us to look outside of ourselves and say, oh, I can eat this number of calories, I'm going to do this, as compared to listen to our very wise bodies that are saying, hey, you need this, or you're not hungry, or you're eating because you're stressed. For example, somebody told me how he was trying to lose some weight and he was using a calorie tracker and he had, like 1,000 calories left for the day or something like that. So he literally takes this prepackaged icing container, for cake, and he just gets a spoon and he's like, I can eat basically the whole thing because of X number of calories, or I can eat half of this or whatever. And he just takes this spoon to the icing, One, it makes my stomach turn just thinking about that. But it's like, icing tastes good as compared to, what's actually healthy? What does my body need?
Yeah. Do I need to binge 1,000 calories at the end of the day just to reach that number that I'm supposed to reach? To reach? Yeah. And you had this, what is it? The Goodhart's, the
Goodhart's law.
Goodhart's law. Yeah. If a measure becomes the target, the measure is no longer a good measure. Is it that? I saw on Instagram just today by Wait But Why, a comic where one stick figure was saying, if the measure becomes the target, it's no longer a good measure. And the other stick figure said, oh, let's put bonuses out for measures that have now become targets.
Right. That's hilarious. Yeah. But how many people at the end of the day, they look at their watch and they say, oh, I have 9,800 steps. And they start walking in circles in their bedroom just to get that extra 200 steps in to go to bed. That's not a great way to wind down.
No. I had this one moment where I was in such a good Apple Watch streak when it comes to calories and the activity circle. And I was about to go to bed and I realized that I was 10 calories over. And I figured, well, if I stay up for another 20 minutes, I'm going to be good because it's going to burn like 10 calories of me just sitting around. So that became counterproductive pretty quickly.
But you got your streak.
I got the streak. I got the damn streak. Yeah. For what price?
Yeah. It's amazing how we become these, we're subservient to our watches. Think about it. It's crazy.
And I read recently that there's 2 billion people. I don't know if this was in the Hungry Habit, but I read that 2 billion people are using measurement devices like watches or Fitbits or whatever to track their data. So that just tells you how many people are slaves to those digital devices, which apparently lead to good health, and it doesn't really.
Yeah, I know. The irony.
So in regards to what's going, air quotes, wrong, like you write about this concept of wires being crossed. So evolutionarily speaking, when we, in the good old days of being hunters and gatherers and living like 30 years long, there was, you saw something that was sweet or fatty and you just eat as much as you could because that's a really good idea. And then you see something that scares you and you run away, and that's also a really good idea. But now apparently that kind of got crossed in our brain.
Yeah.
And how does that work?
Well, it works. So these are these basic positive and negative reinforcement processes. And for our ancient ancestors, that's what helped get us to where you and I are alive today, because this helped them survive to reproduce. And the basic process is that there are 3 elements for either of these: a trigger, a behavior, and a result. So with positive reinforcement, they didn't have refrigerators, so they had to go forage for food or hunt for food. And when they found a food source, let's say they found some berries, that would be the trigger. They would eat the berries, that'd be the behavior. And then the result was that their stomach would send this dopamine signal to their brain that said, remember what you ate and where you found it. So it's actually a mechanism to help us learn. It's called context-dependent memory formation. So we form this memory so that when we go back to our camp or our cave, we can remember, hey, that's where the food was, and go back and get some more tomorrow. Same is true for negative reinforcement. You're out foraging for food. You see a bunch of lions or something. You run away. There's the behavior, and the reward is you are not their lunch. You don't eat. You don't get eaten. And then there's the reinforcement that says, hey, don't go over there. That's a dangerous place. In modern day, where these wires get crossed is this mechanism is still in place. We know where the food is. It's in our refrigerator. It's at a couple of clicks on our phone where we can get it delivered. There are 24/7 diners, restaurants. So foods for most of us is readily available, yet the mechanism is still in play. So this is where we learn to associate food not with hunger, but with happy times, with sad times, when we're bored, when we're angry, when we're lonely, when we're, frustrated. All of these different things, because they are unpleasant, especially through the negative emotions, the unpleasant ones, those are the triggers we eat to numb ourselves, to distract ourselves, to get a little sugar rush. And that feels better than the unpleasant emotion. That does 2 things. One is it teaches us to eat not when we're hungry, but because of an emotion. So food equals mood, or food, helps to soothe that unpleasant mood. And it also, teaches us to use these types of distraction techniques when we've got a negative emotion, instead of learning distress tolerance. And I would add in there, our phones, as our Cornel West puts it beautifully, these weapons of mass distraction. Phones, are non-caloric ways to distract ourselves, but they're also ways that we learn sometimes very quickly. We unlearn these very critical distress tolerance mechanisms or tools that I think are very healthy for all of us, because life is not always going to be pleasant. Yeah. and it's okay, right? That's what makes life beautiful. And so if we can learn to be with the unpleasant part, then that becomes beautiful too.
Yeah. Especially since the unpleasantness may on one side come from external things that we didn't really wish for: stressful job, angry boss, disgruntled client, which might be something that we're facing 9 hours a day, depending on the job that we have.
Yeah.
Or in the evening with a family member that might be a little bit more tricky to be around. And so we can't run away from them like we can with a tiger. Okay, now we're good. Right? Tiger's in the background, it's fading out. I'm good. No, this Uncle Bob is going to be there every evening, and I kind of have to deal with that.
So I just want to highlight one thing, just to show how prevalent this is now. The scientists had to come up with a term to describe this, eating in the absence of hunger. And it's a misnomer, but it was developed to help us differentiate the eating when we're actually hungry, when we have a caloric deficit, which is called homeostatic hunger because we're out of balance. This type of eating is called hedonic hunger, right? And you can see how it's a misnomer, because we're eating because of an emotion, not because we're actually hungry. But I just want to highlight that because, it's so prevalent that, somebody had to come up with a term so that we could all agree and say, okay, this is what we're studying. This is what we're looking at.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the way out of this dilemma. You have a 21-day program in the book, and it's separated into 3 parts, 3 challenges. So first is identifying those patterns and those loops that bring us to eat. And then we're going to interrupt that. I'm not going to spoiler how we do that. Please, dear listener, stay tuned. And then lastly, we turn those eating habits, or you turn those eating habits and loops into something that's more rewarding for us. So let's start with the good old patterns that are also ingrained in our day-to-day and what we're doing.
Yeah, this is the easiest part. And so, the mapping process is critical. So if we can't see what habit loop we're in, we can't work with it. And so we can map out what the trigger is, what the behavior is, what the result is, so that we can start to bring into focus what we're doing. Basically, are we eating because we're truly hungry, or is it out of some type of habit? And if it's a habit, what type of habit is it? Is it boredom? Is it, just you see food and you eat it? Is it stress? Is it whatever? And I would even say, so 2 things I'll say about that. One is that the trigger is the least important part of the equation. Mm-hmm. And I want to highlight that because a lot of people focus so much energy on trying to identify or avoid triggers. But from a scientific standpoint, triggers only set the wheel in motion. They're not important for driving it or changing it. So I want to highlight that because a lot of people, I don't want to say waste energy, but spend a lot of time trying to focus on triggers, where instead, if you take a neuroscience approach, they should actually be focusing on the other 2 pieces of the equation.
So by focusing on triggers, do you mean like not having X, Y, and Z at home?
Not necessarily the food itself. Certainly some people have tried that, and we can talk about the pros and cons of that in a minute. But I'm talking about, if somebody has a negative emotion, that could be what triggers them to eat. Because often, they'll be reaching for food and they don't even know why they're reaching for it, right? So they might struggle to identify what it was that kind of kicked the wheel in motion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the first step, is just being able to identify it. And you can simplify the step to really just recognizing, what type of eating pattern is it? Is it boredom? Is it bored eating? Is it stress eating? Is it overeating? Whatever the habit is.
the big aha moment for that was for me that if my belly is not a little bit grumbling, I'm probably hedonic eating. Yeah. This is probably not necessary right now.
Yeah. And I'm glad you bring that forward because there can be a lot of overlap between emotions and homeostatic hunger. But the one that generally is non-overlapping is the one you're talking about. Our stomach doesn't grumble when we're bored. Our stomach doesn't grumble when we're frustrated. We might grind our teeth, but we're not grinding our stomach.
Yeah. So, second one. Now here's the spoiler that I didn't give away earlier. What's the interrupt going to be?
Yes. So this is probably the most challenging and the most counterintuitive for people, because what we've been taught forever is just use your willpower, right?
Yeah.
And I want to highlight that because this is a great sales gimmick for a weight loss program where I can say, this year's diet is this, this, and this, and you have to follow the diet and you'll lose weight or whatever. And if you don't follow it, it's your fault. You don't have enough willpower. You just need to stick with the program. That is really unfortunate because a lot of people feel like there's something wrong with them when they get that message, because they are like, oh, I'm not as good as everybody else. And on top of that, I see this all the time with my clinic patients. They judge themselves, and then they feel bad. And so they eat. So it can even trigger some unhealthy eating habits. So from a neuroscience standpoint, it's really important to know, and I don't know any other way to say it besides just saying it, willpower is more myth than muscle. What I mean by that is when you look at the equations for behavior change, and these go back to the 1970s, basically are unchanged since then. Like they have not been updated because they're so predictive and so powerful in their explanatory power, but they don't include willpower in the equation. So what do they include? They include awareness, which is kind of important and kind of interesting and very interesting to me because my lab for a long time had studied mindfulness. And what I mean by that is our brains are set up to have a reward hierarchy of different behaviors. And that's an efficiency mechanism to help us make decisions quickly and efficiently. So, for example, if I have learned, if I eat some broccoli and I eat some chocolate, from a caloric density standpoint, my brain's going to prefer chocolate because it says, there are more calories packed in here. And so that goes higher on the reward hierarchy. And so if I'm just focusing on survival, my brain's going to pick chocolate over broccoli and so on and so on. So what this does is helps me not have to like eat some broccoli, eat some chocolate, then decide, and then, every day, where it can be like, okay, pick the chocolate. The reason this is relevant is that it highlights how we can change. So we form habits this way, and it also highlights how we can change habits. And the way that works is that we'll set a certain reward value for a behavior. Let's say, let's use chocolate as an example. And let's say that a new chocolatier opens up in my neighborhood, right? A chocolate shop. And I go in there and I don't know how good their chocolate is. So let's say there's this, one of my favorites is mango habanero, where it's like, perfect mix of sweet and spicy. Boom. And heat, habanero has that heat. So let's say they're advertising mango habanero truffles. And so I go and eat their mango habanero truffle, and it's like mind-blowingly good. Oh, this is amazing. So I get what's called a positive prediction error, which means that this is better than the last one what I expect, kind of my gold standard. Yeah. And I get a dopamine spritz in my brain and I learn, hey, this is a good chocolatier. On the other hand, if I eat it, I'm like, oh, this tastes like soap. They screwed this one up. I get a negative prediction error and then I don't go back there. And so both ways I learn. Both of those require awareness. And so knowing that, I can leverage that piece to help people change behavior. So instead of saying just stop overeating, I can have people, have my patients or people in our studies, I can say, okay, pay attention when you overeat and see what that's like. And quickly they learn that overeating doesn't feel very good. They get that negative predictioner. In fact, in one study that we published a couple of years ago now, it only took 10 to 15 times of somebody overeating for that reward value to drop below zero and for them to shift that behavior. So it doesn't take very long. All it takes is awareness, and it has nothing to do with willpower.
Where did this willpower idea come in? When did that become the new kid on the block and everyone was talking about willpower?
Oh, that's a great question. It probably, I'm not a historian, but I know there's a relief that is carved into the Parthenon in Athens in ancient, so this was back, in ancient Greece. And that relief is this horse and a rider. And the horse is the passions and the rider is reason, is our reasoning brain. And so it's been debated hundreds, thousands of years about how strong our willpower is versus our passions. So certainly it's been around a long time. And in diet culture, it's definitely the dominant paradigm.
So I have this reward hierarchy in my brain that says, okay, chocolate is better than broccoli, but also chocolate is better than feeling bad. Or even broccoli is better than feeling bad. So bring in the broccoli. And then I learn over time that, feeling bad or insert any negative, unhelpful emotion at that point, it's kind of still better to feel that tend to binge on 10 pounds of chocolate. So I need to be aware around what's going on, not just in the short term, but also in the long term when I'm throwing in the food to get rid of the emotion and then reprogram the, what's the reward hierarchy like agent in the brain? Is that the
orbitofrontal cortex? Yes. Yeah. So the long-term benefits are somewhat important, but I'm glad you bring that forward because our brains are not very good at looking far into the future. In fact, there's an entire field of science that's dedicated to this called delayed discounting. And what that means is that the farther out a reward is, the more our brain discounts it because it increases the uncertainty around that. We don't know if it's going to happen. So we can say, and anybody that's tried to, and sorry to keep using weight loss as an example, but it's a simple one. Somebody says, oh, it's January and I want to lose, 10 pounds before, the summer, if we're living in the Northern Hemisphere. So, I want to fit into look into my swimming suit in the summer. 6 months is a long time to our brain. And so, we might feel stressed out and the chocolate, the siren song of the chocolate calls to us. And our brain says, 6 months, well, there's the chocolate right now. I could feel better right now. And it's really hard to resist that.
What about the, let's say, 20-minute mark, speaking from experience here, between, I'm feeling a little bit stressed, let me grab some potato chips, to, 20 minutes from now is like, I'm feeling down. It's like, this is why did I do that?
Yeah.
Is that already in that, is it already too far removed for my reward hierarchy to make a shift?
No, it's not. So the closer a result is to a behavior, the more quickly we learn from it. And also, so 20 minutes is relatively close. It's harder to make an association, say, the next day. But I had somebody actually map something out. It was like 2 or 3 days later where she noticed that for some reason, I don't remember if it was a dairy product or something, disagreed with her, but she was able to isolate that variable where she could track it when she ate it or drank it. It was up to 2 days later that she would have this negative consequence. And then she could isolate it and then it went away. So that it's really hard to track over the course of several days because so many things happen. But 20 minutes is pretty reasonable, especially if not a lot of else is happening in the intervening, 20 minutes. So 20 minutes works pretty well. Often, and it generally takes 15 minutes to register satiety anyway. So if somebody tends to overeat, it's important to get that feedback at that 15 or 20 minute mark to check to see, did I eat too much? And then make that clear connection.
And the way to make that connection is something that you in the book titled the craving tool. So
Yes.
can you walk us through part one of the craving tool? There's going to be a return of the craving tool later. But what's part one?
Yeah. So the first part is really just helping us dial in our awareness. So when we're reaching for something that might not be healthy for us, or if we're reaching, so I think of it as a type or an amount of food, we can pick either of those categories. And I can use my own example. I write about this in the book, gummy worms. So I used to be addicted to eating gummy worms. So I would, I would just eat them by the bagful because I knew at least they'd be out of the house after I ate them. And I wasn't going to feel good afterwards, but I'd be over, it'd be over. So what I started doing and have people do with the craving tool is just pay attention as they eat the type or the amount of food. And for me, it was both the type and the amount. And they can start to realize, what the actual experience is and become disenchanted with the behavior. So for me, it was with gummy worms, I was like, oh, these don't actually taste very good. And I started to become disenchanted. And then also it was like, oh, my stomach definitely doesn't feel good. I feel down afterwards. I don't sleep well. And there are all these negative consequences that come from me eating a bag of gummy worms. This can also be true, and we've seen this in our clinical studies, when somebody overeats. They can pay attention as they overeat. And so the first part of the tool really just helps them, identify and make that link between the behavior and the result. Am I eating this type of food, or am I eating this amount of food, and what is the actual result? So that they can build up what I call the disenchantment database, right? Because they've got to build that up, or it'll be much harder to change behavior. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. So the disenchantment database, I've heard about disenchantment not too long ago from a friend who struggles with a sugar addiction and was telling me about, at least like when I'm getting amounts of that in, I'm creating this disenchantment. And your book kind of added something to the equation for me, because when I heard that the first time, it didn't register as something that made sense, because taking this to the extreme, heroin addict is not going to get disenchanted because, okay, now I feel shitty the next day, or an alcoholic would not feel disenchanted. It's like, I need more of that. But you're adding the component of awareness into this. So as you're eating gummy worms or any other food, it's like, what's going on right now? How does this actually taste? Why am I doing this? What's happening in my body as I put yet the other one in there? And then face the disenchantment of yeah, okay, actually, I've reached this, what you call the pleasure plateau. I'm kind of like, this is enough. This is good, but I'm gonna keep or most likely without much practice, I'm gonna keep doing that more and more, but registering it and being able to say, okay, this, 10, 20, 30 minutes later, this wasn't it while I was doing it. And it's not what I was looking for after the fact as well.
Yeah. And there's a piece that can help here, which is bringing in heaps and heaps of kindness as we do this for ourselves, for the process, because often we'll sit there and judge ourselves and think, oh, I'm a bad person. Why can't I do this? And we spend all this energy judging ourselves and getting these habit loops themselves instead of opening to the experience and asking, what can I learn from this? And so if we bring kindness in, it helps us open to whatever happens and not judge it and just say, oh, okay, now I know what it's like when I overeat. This is what it feels like, so that we can really be in a growth mindset and maximize our learning.
This is so interesting that you jumped to kindness, because I certainly had that on my list of questions as well. But particularly now that you bring this up, I was talking with our mutual colleague, Dr. Diana Hill, just 2 days ago about kindness. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked her is, okay, the idea of bringing in kindness makes sense. How do I do it? As I'm sitting there shoveling that stuff in my mouth, what does like bringing kindness actually look like? What is steps number, I don't know, 1, 2, 3?
Right. So kindness is often foreign to many of us, where we just have not spent a lot of time being kind to ourselves. We might be very kind to other people, but not extend that to ourselves. So it can start, especially if it feels strange, we can start just by remembering what it feels like when we've been kind to somebody else, right? As a way to kickstart that or kindle, put a little bit of kindling in that fire. It feels good. It feels open. It feels warm, at least for me. A lot of people report it that way. And so we can notice what kindness feels like. Then we can notice, what it's like. So whether it's we've been kind to somebody else, somebody's been kind to us, and then we can just remember the last time we've been kind to ourselves. Some things, it can be as simple as, taking some time to do some stretching in the morning or to drink a glass of water to hydrate ourselves. It can be very simple things. And then we notice what that feels like. And then that actually taps into the same reinforcement learning mechanism where we can see, oh, this actually feels pretty good. So the next time we're beating ourselves up, we can notice what that feels like. We can become disenchanted with that. We can build our disenchantment database around judgment. And then we can build this enchantment database with kindness and notice how kindness actually helps us open to learn from our experience, because it just helps, it makes us more open as compared to feeling closed down or closed off to our experience. So I think a great way to practice it is just to remember what it feels like, and then remember all the times that we've done even little things. And that makes it easier for us to just practice that act of kindness to ourselves. And in the moment, it can be as simple as, yeah, this is hard, right? Acknowledging that. I think Kristen Neff has great ways of teaching people self-compassion. Those can be very helpful, but it can be as simple as like, oh yeah, this is hard. Recognizing a lot of people struggle this way. Acknowledging that we're doing the best that we can. One thing that I found very helpful with my patients is just to remind themselves that this is just their brain that's gotten miswired a little bit, and it's not their fault. I have a patient who she's used the mantra, "Oh, this is just my brain," as a reminder to not judge herself for when she was stuck in whatever the habit was, and that it was just her brain that got miswired, which actually helps it rewire in that very instance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've been aware with our eating and the way we're doing it, why we're doing it, and then how it feels, rearranging that reward hierarchy. And here comes the second part of the craving tool. And this is where we're looking predictively into the future. This part is really interesting, and I've been practicing it since I read about it, and it's incredible. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, this is where we get to nerd out on some neuroscience. I could do this all day. It's so fun, so fascinating. So our brains are prediction machines. And what I mean by that is that our brains are constantly trying to predict the future so that it can help us survive. And that prediction could be as simple as, what's it like to take a footstep, right? We're predicting, what walking based on our previous experience of walking, or walking up a flight of stairs, or walking, maybe we go to a new flight of stairs that we've never been to before. We're going to go back into our memory banks of all the old flights of stairs that we walked up and use those as a way to predict how it's going to go when we walk up this flight of stairs. The same is true for food. So we can take all that information from our past experience, which is wonderful because we don't have to spend a lot of time in that first part of the craving tool to build that disenchantment database. We might have already built up a really nice database that we are not even aware of. So every time we've overeaten, as long as we can recall what that's been like, that memory can help us predict the future. And so the second part is really just there to help people before they go into, whatever the habitual behavior is, to pause and just kind of pull up that memory bank and use that as a way to ask, well, what's it going to be like? So basically asking, what was this like the last time I did this? And that, it's like, so if we overate, just recalling what it was like to overeat. For me, this still works extremely well. And I can't even remember how many years ago I stopped eating gummy worms because it was so long ago. Maybe 10, I have probably more than 10 years now, but I can still remember what it was like to eat them. And I am absolutely not interested. My wife gets gummy things for, during the holiday season every year from her family. She doesn't even ask me anymore if I want any. And so because I can look at them and I can just recall, and my stomach still turns because for me, just not so good. So that second part of the craving tool is there to help us just draw upon all of our wisdom from our past experience so that we can project into our present, what it will be like if we do X. And if we can't do that, we're like, I'm going to go ahead and eat it. Great. We're back at step one of the craving tool, and we can build more disenchantment data.
Yeah, the retrospective, the learning from failure, which is so amazing that you can go through your memory. You don't even have to eat that stuff, and you can forgive yourself for making that mistake because there's still a lot to be learned from that. And the way this played out for me recently was I was in a episode we did with all the co-hosts together. I think this was at the end of last year. We talked about our guilty pleasures. And I admitted that one of my guilty pleasures are the plant-based nuggets by Burger King. And that every once in a while I get a big pack of those plant-based nuggets, which still cost more than the actual chicken nuggets, and fries. And then I'd eat that. And it's delicious and I like it and I sleep like shit after. I wake, I know I'm going to fall asleep and 2 hours later, I'm awake for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So the last 2 times I went past Burger King, I was like, yeah, this is going to taste really good. And you're going to screw up your entire night and you're going to be a mess tomorrow. Is it worth it?
Yeah.
It's like, every once in a while, I have to admit the answer was still yes. And then I regretted it predictably the next day.
Uh-huh.
And you make a crucial point when you describe the second part of the craving tool that we can't think about it logically. We have to actually go into our body and remember what it's going to feel like and how it felt like the last time. So just having a little bit of a pro and con list in our prefrontal cortex is not going to cut it.
Yes. I wish our thinking brains were stronger than they actually are, but it's really the feeling body that does all the heavy lifting. So our feeling body is much stronger and wiser than our thinking brain. And so that's where we have to focus our attention. So what that means is that we feel into change rather than think our way into change.
Oh, and in regards to that, you made a really I think very important point in that alcohol shortcuts the entire thing. Like the moment alcohol comes in, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, awareness goes offline, and the entire system is kind of falling apart.
Yeah, it's really hard to pay attention when we're inebriated, when we've had too much to drink. The good news is we can still learn from that afterwards, just hard to do it in the process.
So what's the final part there? Finding those new rewards that are much better, much more supportive, just feel better, short term, long term. What you call this, the bigger, better offer, or the bigger, bestest offer? I don't remember.
Well, the shorthand is the bigger, better offer, and I have a chapter, I think, that's entitled "The Biggest, Bestest Offer" when we're really meeting our needs rather than feeding our wants. But to start off, the bigger, better offer could simply be not doing the old behavior. So with your example, right? So we become disenchanted with eating the fried food because it messes with our sleep. And so that's the second step. And then the third, you you go and you drive by the Burger King and you simulate it. Oh, what would it be like to eat these? And then you're like, no, it's not worth it. And so that's the bigger, better offer right there, is just refraining from doing it. Notice how that doesn't take willpower, right?
Yeah.
It takes feeling into your
no willpower
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. So the bigger, better offer right there is just not doing the behavior, whether it's overeating or indulging in the fried food or whatever. So that's important to highlight, that it's not going to make chocolate not taste good. It's not going to make ice cream not taste good. It's not going to make, the fried food not taste good. But it can help us really see all of the results very, very clearly. So we might eat less ice cream. We might eat less chocolate. We might stop at that pleasure plateau rather than going off the cliff of overindulgence. So that's the first part. But the other part is just noticing, like, well, what is it? So what is it that is better? So for me, still like to have some dessert. If it's not gummy worms, it opens up the realm of opportunity to explore. And this is where, for me, blueberries. Oh my gosh. I could go on and on and on about how I love blueberries. I just had some, I found some earlier and had some earlier today. They're delicious.
Today's episode is brought to you by blueberries.
By blueberries. Yes, that's right. Good for your brain. Tastes good too. So whether it's blueberries, whether it's eating a few pieces of dark chocolate, for me, like I mentioned, I love these habanero mango truffles, but I don't eat a whole box of them because, man, I'd be right there with you, like waking up with a stomach ache and not sleeping well. But one of them, game on. And when I know that I can be satisfied with one, it helps me savor it even more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now it's time to actually, for the first time, enjoy the food.
Yeah.
For the very first time.
Yeah. That's important to double click on, because a lot of people spend so much time creating these food rules and then putting themselves in food jail for not following them. And so they're like, oh, I can have this amount of this. And they're so focused on amount or restriction or restraint that they're not actually even enjoying the food. And so here it opens up the freedom to be able to actually taste, to savor, to enjoy, and find the food that really works well with our bodies.
Beautiful. So a couple of more questions that came up for me and that you're not directly addressing in the book. So here we go. Here's the how would you call it? The improv round.
Yeah.
One thing that I realized in my own experiments with these amazing tools is that sometimes I was asking myself if I'm actually eating enough. The moment I switched over from the routine meal, this is what I eat, this is when I eat, and this is how I often eat too much. But suddenly it's like, no, Michael, you know what? You're going to eat when your belly grumbles, and you're going to eat until you feel full, and then you check in again 20 minutes later and see how it's going. And I'm not tracking calories. How do I make sure that I'm actually getting enough, especially enough protein, as someone who does a lot of workout?
Yeah. So this is where we get to experiment. And, because each of us are different and have individual needs, and, might be how much we work out or what our metabolism is or whatnot. So this is where we can listen to our bodies, and our bodies are pretty good at telling us, especially the more we can dial in our awareness, they're pretty good at saying, like we start craving something that's high in protein. It's like, oh, maybe I'm not getting enough protein. Or we start craving this or that. It's amazing how our bodies are pretty good at telling us in non-word language what we need. So the more we open to like, oh, am I getting enough protein, for example, or, oh, am I getting enough this or that? The more we can just explore and see, okay, do I need to eat more? What is my body telling me?
Okay, let's see how that goes. Let's see what my body is telling me about those cans of beans that I have in the pantry and when it's time to crack them open.
Yeah, let me know.
I love to cook. I love to go shopping for food, which is my main way of procrastinating on doing, actual work. So I often find myself, or before my experiments with your book, or my changed lifestyle with your book, I should say, something that I did a lot was eat a lot of really healthy stuff. So I'd made a huge salad with just a little bit of vinegar, like this super healthy thing in front of me. It was a little bit too much. I was like, yeah, come on, but it's salad. Like, you can eat this gigantic salad while you're watching a movie, because you're not. This is just a little bit of calories, and it's mostly fibers and waters. Is there something wrong with me, Dr. Judd, or is that something I should look at? Or is like healthy stuff? No, go all in.
Well, I would say everything is worth a little bit of awareness, right? And so if you're comfort eating during a movie, this is where it gets back to that biggest, bestest offer. We can ask the question, what do I actually need versus what I want, right? So like you're saying, we could be comfort eating a big salad, but we're still comfort eating. Right. And so we're scratching that itch of the want rather than meeting that need, whatever that need of comfort, let's say. And so it's absolutely worth exploring. And it might even be a subtler signal, because a bunch of salad digests, quickly, and you're not going to get that stomach bomb and, trouble sleeping as much as you might if you'd done that with with a bunch of fried food or some ice cream. So absolutely still worth exploring, right? And seeing what we can learn.
It shall be explored. So here's my last question. And this is going to be like totally out of, left field. Uh-huh. Just because you brought up the word, I think just once, in regards to blueberries. And it's a topic that always comes up when I talk with friends, with family, about healthy eating, and that's fruit and fructose. And some will say, yeah, it's like fructose is sugar, so, just a little bit of it. Others will say, well, 2 handsful or something of a fruit, and that's enough. You shouldn't eat more. Or, well, this is like really healthy stuff, like go all in and eat the fruits. Because it comes in this healthy packaging, and it's like a low glycemic index because of all the fibers around it, and there's vitamins and all the good stuff in there. Mm-hmm. So, what's the word on fruit and fructose? And I know this isn't in line like with the topic of the book in and of itself, but since I'm talking to an expert on blueberries, I thought I'd throw it.
Well, I do love blueberries, and I'm not a nutritionist, but I will say, what I've learned in my medical training is that, certainly unprocessed food is healthier than processed and ultra processed food. That's just every day I'm seeing new articles come out around ultra processed food. So, when somebody is extracting something like fructose and removing it from all the, the matrix that it's surrounded by of all this good stuff, it's not going to be as good. So there, it's just really important to, the general, I think, guideline that I like is, the less processed, the better. And that also helps us listen to our bodies, because our bodies, I don't binge on blueberries, because I'm getting enough fiber in there, et cetera, et cetera. My body's saying, okay, you're full. You don't need to eat a whole quart or whatever. The second piece that is a helpful guideline is anytime our brain says should, that is a red flag for creating some type of rule where we're stuck in our head rather than listening to our body. And so for me, that's a great opportunity to wake up and say, oh, here's shoulding. The joke is we should all over ourselves.
Yeah, we should all over ourselves. Yeah.
And so that can be an opportunity to wake up and ask, what do I need versus what do I think I should do?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Judd. This is amazing. Thank you for the brilliant book, and thank you for all the work that you do, that you have done. this has changed my life a lot to the better. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's really nice to hear. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review or contributing on Patreon.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our newsletter and connecting with us on social media.
We'd like to thank our podcast production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.